Hey, welcome to Game Talk, the show where we talk about games. I'm Max.
And I'm Kaila.
And we're here today with part one of our multi-part series on Magic the Gathering, the biggest, most complicated card game in the history of mankind. But don't let that worry you, because we're going to break it down to the basics. Magic the Gathering is a collectible card game, which is also sometimes called a trading card game. It's a game played entirely using these cards. There are thousands and thousands of different unique cards out there that you can use to build your own deck. And then you use your deck against a friend or a rival who uses their deck to duke it out in a contest of strategy. So what's your favorite thing about Magic the Gathering?
So I like Magic the Gathering because it involves so much strategy and there's no set way to win the game. I like the fact that you can come up with different ways to create your own deck, different colors to revolve it around, different mechanics and strategies you can build it around it, and then you can kind of show off like, hey, I made this deck revolving around this cool idea over here, check it out, and then, you know, win against your opponent hopefully with that cool idea that you came up with, or one that you saw online or a friend told you about, and then you decided to try it yourself and put your own spin on it.
Yeah, I agree with you. I like Magic because, well, for one, I really like to collect things, and so it's cool that it's a collectible card game, and so you build this collection. But unlike something like a rock collection, where that's the whole purpose of it is just to have the collection, then you go through your collection, you have all these game pieces, and you can put them together in a nearly infinite number of ways. And then, like you said, that's where the strategy comes in. Mm-hmm. You know, and so you can make a really straightforward deck that just, I do damage to you till you die. Mm-hmm. But you can also fit these puzzle pieces together in all kinds of unique combinations that make all this really unexpected stuff, undesigned for stuff happen. And so really in Magic, you're limited mostly by your intellect. Mm-hmm. You know, that's like your only limit. That and money. But I mean, you can build good decks for cheap.
Yes, there's such a thing as budget building.
Yeah, and you can get nasty decks that way. So
oh, yeah.
I really like that it's like a fully modular, customizable game.
Mm-hmm. Hugely customizable.
And I like the social aspect a lot.
Yeah, it's fun to be able to play with somebody face to face.
Yeah.
So in Magic, you take on the role of a planeswalker, which is a being that is able to move from different planes of existence in the multiverse that is in the realm of Magic. You fight against other planeswalkers by using a deck of spells that you created in order to reduce your opponent's life points to 0. Or, you know, there are other methods of winning as well, but we'll get to that at some point.
Now, Magic doesn't actually use a board, but we call the area where you play cards the board. Here's an overview of what the board looks like. This is the library. You draw new cards from here.
You hold up to 7 cards in your hand.
This is the graveyard, which is what we call the discard pile in Magic. Cards that have been killed or otherwise used up are sent here.
And lands go here.
Every other kind of card goes here.
Lastly, something showing each player's life total needs to be on the table, preferably somewhere where everyone can see it.
Okay, now next episode, we're going to go in depth on how to read these cards and what all this wealth of information means. But for now,
this is how much a card costs to cast. Don't worry, we'll show you how to read this later.
This is the card's name.
This is a picture that usually looks pretty cool.
This is the card's type. For now, just remember this. Cards that say land here are lands. Cards that don't say land here are spells.
This area is the text box, which contains important text here.
And then this text is what's called flavor text. It doesn't have any effect on the game. It's just neat information or a cool quote about the creature or event that's pictured in the card.
Also, not every text in the box is important. Sometimes it's just flavor text. Okay, so now we know how to set up our board state and what a card looks like. So what do we do with all this stuff? Well, this is what a typical game of Magic the Gathering looks like when it's played.
First, determine who goes first. This can be done any way that all players agree is fair. The most common ways are by flipping a coin, rolling a die, or using an app that can determine this for you.
Next, shuffle your deck and then pass it to your opponent for them to cut it. You will also cut your opponent's deck as well.
Next, place the entire deck in the library.
Now you're going to draw 7 cards. This will make up your hand.
Now you're ready for your first turn.
Each turn consists of 5 phases. Don't worry, it sounds complicated, but it's not too hard once you get a couple of rounds going.
Now, okay, we should note, don't just watch these videos one time and think you're supposed to have every rule memorized. This is meant to be more of like a primer, especially this episode is just for you to check out and see if this game interests you enough that it's worth learning more about. Really the best way to learn is by playing a few games, and also by watching later videos in the series. We'll go into more depth on the rules.
Don't worry about remembering how to do everything right off the go. Okay, so 5 phases.
So first is the beginning phase, which is broken down into 3 separate steps. There's the untap step. That's the first part of your turn, where you take any cards that you used last turn and reset them so you can use them again this turn.
Then there is your upkeep step. Normally, nothing really happens on this step unless otherwise stated, so we'll skip it for now.
Then there's the draw step. Every turn, you draw 1 card from the top of your library.
Then begins your first main phase. One of 2 main phases during your turn, which you can use to play cards or spells. You can play 1 land on each of your turns, and you can use the land to create mana to pay for the spells that you plan to cast.
Next is the combat phase, which is broken down into 5 steps. First, it's the beginning of combat step. This is another step where usually nothing happens unless one of your cards says otherwise. So for now, we're just going to skip it.
Next is declaring attackers. This is the step where you declare which of your creatures are going to be attacking and who they're going to be attacking.
Then it's the declare blockers step. Your opponent announces which of their creatures is going to be defending them.
Next after that is the combat damage. This is where you compare the numbers and determine if there are any creatures dying or if any opponents have lost any life.
Finally, it's the end of combat step. Again, nothing happens unless. Skip.
After the combat phase, there is a second main phase. You get another chance to basically play some other cards or cast some other spells that you didn't do on your first main phase.
And if you didn't play a land on your first main phase, you can play one now during the second main phase. Now, after the second main phase is the ending phase, and that's broken up into 2 really short steps. First, it's the end step. Again, nothing happens here. Don't worry, these nothing happens steps are going to make a lot more sense later. There's a lot of cards that'll make things happen on these steps. But if none of those cards are out, nothing happens.
After that is the cleanup step. Count your hand, make sure you don't have more than 7 cards in your hand. Discard any extra cards that you have if you do. And then after that, your turn is over.
Now your opponent takes their turn in the same way, and you keep taking turns until someone wins.
Now, don't get us wrong, we did pretty much oversimplify all of the steps, phases, and how to take your turn because a lot of the things that happen on your turn or your opponent's turn are going to be determined by the spells that are played. So the cards themselves add a lot of extra rules in things that happened that we can't really go into detail here without basically showing you.
Now, don't worry, when it's explained like this in like a classroom type setting, it sounds really complicated, And to be fair, Magic is a fairly complicated game, but it's not a difficult game to understand. It's a really difficult game to have explained to you, but when you see it being played, it's easy. As long as you are a fairly confident reader, just basically the whole game consists of reading what the cards say and doing that. Just the cards don't tell you the order of the turns and that kind of stuff. So that stuff you have to know going into it, but that stuff is a lot easier to learn once you're actually doing it, just like anything.
This episode is the first on a series of Magic the Gathering that we're going to be doing. Next time we'll go into more detail about all the different card types and what they do and what all the information means in the text box. Thanks for tuning in and giving us the opportunity to explain how this game works, basically. Hope you guys tune into the next episode where we'll be going over everything much further.
And don't forget, if you want to be more involved in the show, you can check us out on Facebook. We have our own Facebook group. Also, if you want to make shows like this, we are able to make this show thanks to Hawaii Kauai Community Television. We don't, spoiler alert, we don't own this big nice studio and all these cameras. We borrow them from Hawaii. And Hawaii specializes in letting members of the public like us or like you come in and shoot your own TV show or take your cameras on the road and shoot something out in the field. So
if you want to check out Hawaii or if you want to check out the rest of our content, links are down below.
And we'll see you next time. Bye.